I was in the waters in Jamaica, and I walked further and further and further in, and there really was no stopping what was about to happen. Welcome to the Lips and Language podcast. My name is Cola, where we talk about life, love, and language. Remember to subscribe, like, and share. Let's get into today's topic. Have you ever worked on something, a project, and you're just so focused on it, so focused on getting it done? You anticipate the day, you anticipate the moment, you anticipate how everything's gonna go, and then when it's done, you're just like breathing a sigh of relief in one sense, but at the same time, you're like, okay, so what's next? So if you caught last week's video, then y'all know that I was headed to a wedding in British Columbia. I'm in Ontario, and in Canada, let me just say that. And so I just got back from the wedding earlier this week, and y'all, I've been asleep. I've been just trying to put things in perspective. Now, on the plane as I went down, I was reading something about podcasts, really. And when I had started this podcast, I really didn't think too far ahead of what it was going to be and where it was going to go. I originally started the podcast just to read my book and to get the message out there, to get the story out there. I'm like, I'm an author. This is how I can market myself. By me reading the book, people will see how interesting it is and they will want to get the whole thing. And it didn't happen that way. But I stay continuing talking about the book, knowing that the messaging that God has, knowing that there was a reason that I not just wrote the book, but I've been teaching from the book. There's a reason that God has given me such an instrumental tool to use and skills to speak into the lives of other people using poetry or storytelling or my testimony in different capacities. And so I'm not quite worried about what the future is of the book. I know the message is going to get out there. But when I started this podcast, that's what it was. And week after week, it would just be me reading a chapter. And it really helped because it forced me, one, to put audio to the words. And two, it forced me to, as I was rereading it, there was moments that I would break down and cry. And I left those parts in, honestly. I didn't edit the audiobook because I wanted it to be authentic. One thing about me is transparency and authenticity. Like, I will leave a moment in just so y'all can see the behind the scenes. Like, I'm not about to be polished on this stage because the one who polishes me is God. Everything else I do, sometimes the mistakes I make is for other people. If I make a mistake here, unless I'm like really fumbling over my words, y'all need to know it's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about getting it done. I have a mentor who says progress over perfection. And I just love that because coming from a background of like perfectionism and always trying to achieve the best of things and putting my all into it, sometimes it can feel like where we have to be perfect. Sometimes it can feel like it has to be a specific way. And if it's not that way, let me just adjust this. If it's not that way, then it feels like, man, we failed, right? And so starting this podcast, like I said, it was me reading this book. And I had taken down, once I finished, when I finally gotten to the end of reading the book, I put it in the audiobook because now the audiobook was ready. And so by doing one thing, I kind of fixed another thing, right? But there's moments that I would break down in that book because I'm healing. As I'm reading it, I'm going through it. I'm understanding the different things that I experienced. And I felt bad for the girl in the story. Even though it was me, I felt removed enough that I was like, man, that is really like tough for that little girl. So today, I actually wasn't even gonna record this right this moment, but I had a moment where my mind was just really scattered. And I had done so much in preparation for this wedding. I was like the wedding planner, essentially. But I didn't, like, my friend, she did a lot of the planning. Like, I put together a list, and I kind of just see myself as the guide. I call myself the unofficial wedding planner, and she's like, why unofficial? But for me, I was like, I was just guiding her along the way. I took care of certain things, she took care of the other things, making sure that we had the plan together. And now the actual wedding was beautiful. It was super beautiful. I saw God move in ways. I saw God upgrade things. I saw him do just incredible things in bringing people together and just having a really impactful wedding. At one point I turned out to be the MC, and I fumbled that job in the greatest way possible. There was just so many different things that I was doing, so many areas that I was moving with Bachelorette and all these other things, that when it came to, you know, the announcement when you introduce them, you're like, introducing Mr. and Mrs. Yeah, well, as I introduced them, I went to say their name and completely blacked out. Completely, just like my mind went blank right in the middle. I'm like, introducing Mr. and Mrs. Said the first 3 letters, and I was just like, complete silence. My sister had to cover and tell me, like, it's this. And I was like, yeah, woo! It's good when we can laugh at ourselves. It's good when we can look at it and be like, wow. But I honestly just had so many things on my mind, and my mind was overloaded in many ways. But I thoroughly enjoyed every part of the wedding. I enjoyed the behind scenes. I enjoyed being a part of it. I enjoyed every part that God had me do. I enjoyed it, and it was a beautiful wedding. And it was just really exciting to see how it all played out. And the thing about it is, before even going out for the wedding, I had been thinking, like, man, I need some things to change. I need some things to shift up. Like, I feel like I've been stagnant a little bit, and I needed to move. Now, I'm still packed to move, for my actual move. And so even that was interesting. As I'm reflecting today, one of the things that I noticed is, sometimes we feel like we don't have enough, right? Sometimes I feel like I don't have enough. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do for this wedding. I don't know what clothes I'm going to bring. I don't know how I'm going to do all that. And really, truly, God allowed me to be able to pack clothes without having to go and reach into those suitcases. Because I was like, oh, all my good clothes are in there. All the things that I need are in my Los Angeles bags. And I was still able to find clothes from my closet, from the stuff that I have. I was still able to find clothes and find outfits for the whole weekend that took care of it without me having to go in my bag. And so what it's showing me is that I'm able to live on less. Like, I'm able to get creative enough with the less that I have instead of needing more. And sometimes we always feel like we need more, when realistically we just need to open our eyes to see what is around us. I know that was true for me. And the things that I didn't have, I created. I talked about the shawl and how I made that. And it started off with me wanting to make wedding shoes, because I didn't have shoes for the wedding. And it started off with these first slides, then it turned into a bracelet, and it turned into a purse, and it turned into these beautiful shawls that worked out so perfectly, because the room we're in for dinner was a little bit chilly. And while everyone else was cold, my sister and I were chilling. Like, my sister and I were warm. We had easy access. We could put things in the pockets. Like, it turned out to be such a good design for the perfect occasion. And I just look at how before the wedding, I was worried about how this is going to work, how that's going to work, buying new lipsticks and everything. And throughout the wedding, God showed me how he provided. Either things that I thought I needed, I didn't need at all, or the things that I actually did need, he provided in a different way than I thought I would get it. And so God has been very instrumental in speaking. And the last video, I talked about how God spoke through a shawl. And I think in the season, it's been me having to tune into how he's speaking to me. That is not necessarily the ways I used to hear from him, but he's still speaking, and recognizing it. And then on top of recognizing it, silencing everything else. Like, I've been saying, God, I just want to hear you clearly. God, I just want to hear you clearly. And at the same time, I feel like my mind is clustered, is cluttered, and I remember there's a story in my memoir. My sister, family, we were all in Jamaica. And during this one time we were in the water, I love the water. I love being in the ocean. I love being in pools. Like, I'm a water person. And so while in this water, I remember just how beautiful and serene and peaceful this water looked. And I just remember just walking and just walking and just walking. And like, I wasn't really fixed or focused on anything, but just how pretty it was, and how peaceful it would be just to lay down in it and just to allow the water to wash over me and to just take me wherever it needed to go. And I remember walking and hearing my sister kind of like call my name, and I wasn't really like paying attention. I was just focused, and she called it a few times to kind of snap me out of it. And when I got back, I mean, after I got out of the water, I just started drinking. We were at a resort, so I just started drinking like all the pina coladas I could and just like numbed myself. And when I got back, I ended up going to see my therapist at the time, and she was just laying it out for me how that was a part of, or could be considered like a suicide attempt, in just the way that I was just so focused on the peaceful quietness of it, and I wasn't focused on the repercussions of it. I wasn't focused on I was just focused on, look, let me just lay down. Let me just do this. And it kind of just awakened me to understand that when our minds are not set on the right things, how easily it can get tripped up, how easily we can just drift, how easily we can just fade away. And then when I stepped out of it, at the time, like the joke is, I don't really like alcohol like that, but at the time, that day, my coping mechanism was alcohol. And how we use these different vices to help us cope with a moment that we don't fully understand. The main thing I always advocate for is understanding what it is that's happening to us, understanding what it is we're feeling, understanding, just being really self-aware. Because when we're self-aware, we can see things and we can catch things before it happens. And so today, as I was reflecting, I also was doing like way back reflection. Like, I feel like I'm in this space where I'm ready to take off, but I also feel very confused on like which way to go, what to do. And I've been feeling this confusion, and it's like standing in a crowd and everyone around me is moving, but I'm standing still, and I'm like screaming and crying, but nobody's seeing me. I'm like visible, but invisible. And it just feels really, really, really overwhelming. And that's what my mind felt today. This is what prompted me to do this video today, or right now, because I was going to put it off. And I said, you know what, let me capture the moment. Let me capture the feelings. Let me capture the thoughts that I have in this, at this time, so that later on, I'm not trying to recall what I felt, but I'm in the moment, right? And as I'm sharing this, I took a moment, because I could feel what was happening. I could feel my mind overthinking. I could feel my brain hurting, kind of like how it feels right now. And I haven't gone through a period like this in a few years. It's been a while since my mind has gotten to this state. And a part of me is like, but I've been doing so well. Like what is causing my mind to go back to the state of just feeling confused? Now, part of it is I have to remind myself that I'm not, that I do hear clearly, that I am thinking, clearly. One of the things that I do is I speak out loud, and I say, I trust you, Father. I may not understand what's happening, but I trust you, God, and I need you to hear it. I need you to hear me say it, because I need you to know that it's true. I need you to know that it's something that I believe, and so I'm speaking it to you in a way that you and anybody else can hear it. But the other thing I had to do today specifically is I had to get up. I had to find a space. I just went to the bathroom, and I just took a couple breaths, and I was breathing, and I was like, okay, focus. Like, although a lot of things might have happened in the last week, in the last year, that I want to focus on, that I want to reflect on, that I want to debrief on, now was not the moment to do that debrief. Now I'm not in the mental capacity to do a debrief on what just happened. What I need to do right now is focus forward. And so the title of this episode today is called Focusing Forward. And what I noticed is when I started to say it out loud, that I'm going to focus forward. When I started to breathe, when I started to close my eyes and just like, it was funny because I was like, I could really use a scripture right now. I mean, but nothing's coming to mind of what I needed specifically for the mind. But I'm in a process of studying Matthew 6, seek first the kingdom and everything else will be added, not being anxious for anything, not worrying about the food, not worrying about the clothing, not worried about all the mundane things that God can take care of and the minute things. But I'm also embracing Philippians 4 verse 7, where the peace of God will passeth all understanding. And that was a scripture that grounded me when my son passed. The Friday when the doctors told me that he was going to die, and the Sunday when people came to pray for me, that was the feeling that I had, this peace that overcame me, knowing that no matter what happens, even though I don't understand it, even I don't know where to go, even I don't know what is the next step or how long these things are going to last, I do know that God is good. And I do know that God is not going to leave me. And I do know that God has a plan for me. And so taking this moment to breathe, taking this moment to remind myself of the battles I've already faced and how far I've already come and how much God has for me, got me to a place where I was calm, where I said, I'm not going to focus on what I can't control. What I am going to focus on is moving forward. What has God told me to do? I may not know what's next. And I'm also like slowly cutting off myself from different voices, different sermons, different things that I feel like I've surrounded myself with, that I've kind of just like, do you ever get caught up in just watching TV and you're just watching other people's lives go by instead of like embracing and being present in your own? That's kind of what it's felt like. It's felt like you know what? I tried doing a lot for myself and it didn't work. So let me just watch other people's lives for a little bit and get caught up in them. And I got caught up in doing for church and doing for people and doing for friends and all these different things, because it's easier to be there for other people. It's easier to do things for them than to not have the things in your life that you know is coming or that you know you need. So in this moment that I took the time to breathe and remind myself to focus forward, I said, what is it he's told me to do? Well, I know that I got to focus on the podcast. I know that I'm still leaving. I know that I want to focus on nutrition, health, keeping my mind healthy. And if all I do is pour myself into me in a really positive way, pour myself into my mind, getting my mind back, getting my mind on the path that it needs to be. Because that analogy that I said of just being in a room and being visible but invisible and screaming and there's crowds around me, that's how my mind feels right now. But I want my mind to be like sleeping Jesus on the boat, peaceful and so steadfast, even though things rock. And I know how to get my mind there. I know how to train to be and to discipline my mind, essentially to be in that space. It just takes intentionality. It's not even work. It just takes intentionality. And the first thing is to focus on something that I can control, something that I can do. Of all the things that I can't focus on that. I gotta focus on the one thing that I can, which is pouring my heart out in this podcast that I'm creating, making sure that I'm hearing correctly, making sure that I'm doing, making sure that my messaging is not just me just trying to fill the space, but there's intentionality to it. Because the thing is, we as people, we go through so many things in life, and it's not very often we have a space that is safe. It's not very often we have a space where we can cry, where we can be at peace, where we can seek advice, where we can feel encouraged. It's not very often that those things are created for us. It's not very often that we have a path of healing, or that we even know how to move to the next stage. And so in focusing forward, my next step right now is to put a plan together. What do these topics look like? How do I want to build this out? What guest speakers am I going to have here? What am I doing with this space? How do I keep God at the forefront of everything that I do? Beyond praying for it, beyond praying before I start. How do I make sure that my vision is His vision? How do I make sure that I'm staying on track? I've deleted most of my social media, or I just signed out. I haven't deleted. I've signed out of. If you send me messages on Instagram, I'm not going to get it. I've signed out of Instagram, signed out of Facebook. I don't use TikTok. I'm really only on this YouTube platform, and only because this is the platform that I know that God has called me to. I have had to eliminate all distractions, anything that is hindering me, anything that is a cause for pause, anything that in this time could take me off the path that I need to be in. I have had myself to cut and to discipline myself. And this is the first step. I'm not going to overwhelm myself. I'm not going to do more. So I'm planning. I'm remembering to breathe. I'm taking breaks. If I need to get up in the middle of doing something to go to the bathroom and breathe, that's what I'm doing. To get my mind on track and reminding myself out loud. It's not enough to say it just in our minds, because our minds are already crowded with so many things. Out loud, I'm speaking. I am okay. I am safe. I am on the right path. I am moving with God. God's got me. I don't make it overcomplicated. I just speak the truth of what I know. And through this, I'll see a change. Through this, making sure that I'm drinking water, and making sure that I'm eating nutritious food, nutrient-dense food that is really going to make a difference in how my overall body feels. Like, these are the things that are important when going through, like, walking in the dark. When you walk in the dark, you got to focus forward. You focus on the one thing you could possibly see, and you follow it out. You don't get distracted by what could be in the corner. You just focus forward and keep moving. And so I pray that this conversation is of use, because we definitely deserve the healing that God has for us. We definitely deserve to get to the other side of trauma, of situations, of suicide attempts, of thoughts, of breaking down, of feeling that we're alone. Like, we need to get the other side of it. And we can only get to the other side of something by walking through it, walking over it, around. Like, we have to keep walking forward. So focus forward, keep pushing, and we will get through this. I will talk to you soon. Have an amazing, amazing, amazing night. I am praying for you. I just trust that this is going to reach who it needs to reach. And we're resetting our minds in this moment to do more and to believe more than we ever thought it could. As always, listen for the message coming up, because it's important. And yeah, keep smiling.